Hey guys, it's your boy. Absolutely exhausted. Yeah, wow. There's nothing that prepares you for having to do 6 hours of class and then have an 8 hour shift and then do 70 pages of reading and then take a quiz. And it's 8 a.m. So today we're taking a break, at least on my end, and I guess on your end too, because you're pausing to watch this video. And we're gonna look at the top 5 traps for fish keepers. So stay tuned. So trap number 1, breeding your aquatic pets. Now, you may have been keeping fish for a while, or you've just gotten into it, and breeding fish is like, it's the epitome of fish keeping. You know, you're reproducing, maybe you want to make money, maybe you just want to see babies in there, but you need to do it right. You gotta be careful, because it can get out of control really fast, and then you're just stuck with like 1,000 fish that aren't even full grown yet, and you have no space. And that kind of leads into another problem, another trap that we'll get to in a second. When you're looking at this trap, like you should, because, you know, breeding fish is kind of fun, and have you seen my guppy tank? Right? I'm making this video from experience. But when you're making fish, when you're breeding fish, when you're breeding anything aquatic, you gotta make sure that it's something that you can handle, right? So if you have a 5-gallon, and you know, people come to my store all the time and they pick up a 5-gallon, they're like, awesome, we're gonna get some guppies. And I'm like, are you sure you want boys and girls? They're like, yeah, we want to breed them. And I'm like, are you sure you want to breed them? because if you have one tank and you have nowhere to separate them, like when I got my guppies, I knew how to separate them, you know, and this isn't just limited to guppies, I'm just using them as an example, but I knew how to separate the males and females, I knew how to differentiate them, and I still paid the price for it, because if you have a male with a female for a day, she will give birth for the next like 3 months. Like she will hold, it's called milt, so they'll hold the male's milt cells, and they'll keep using them over months to keep making more babies. Like I still have newborns in this tank, and if you think that they're gonna eat their babies, you're wrong. Nothing can prepare them for the amount of babies that they would need to eat for you to not be overloaded. Now, it's not just limited to guppies, of course. Look at snails, you know, snails are terrible. They're really hard to get rid of, because now you're gonna have to get something in there that eats them, or you're gonna have to use something that will exterminate them, or you're just gonna have to collect them yourself, and that's really frustrating. Oh my gosh, that's frustrating. Like I've done that many times, and I still have like at least 100 snails in every tank. Like that's just how it shapes up. And even if you do bring in like a loach or a pufferfish or something like that to exterminate the snails, now you have a ton of shells everywhere. And if that wasn't the substrate you were looking for, then tough luck. Another dimension of this trap is you bring in fish that are aggressive breeders. So I see a problem a lot where people will have two, like convict cichlids. They'll have a male and a female convict cichlid with a bunch of others, or just on their own, and they'll breed, they'll pair up, they'll breed, they'll be super aggressive, and they'll have tons of babies, and they're so protective over their babies. They almost, in my experience, they never eat them, but I guess I've only had store experience, so it doesn't really count. But aggressive breeders, big problem. Crebensis are the same. Anything that's gonna protect, like it's like having guppies, but they're a little harder to raise, the fry, but the guppies will kill anything that gets near the fry. And then you just have this tank full of aggressive fish that all get like a decent size, you know, for the bigger convict cichlids, and it's just a nightmare. So first breeding trap, first fish keeper trap, breeding fish. The second trap for fish keepers, especially new ones, is spending a lot of money. Now, honestly, this could go both ways, spending too much, spending not enough, because when you first get to this hobby, you already have kind of a spending mindset. You know, you're super spendy, you know, you're that online shopper, or you're that super frugal person who's gonna keep them in like a tote, which, you know, both can be fine. But if you go too far one way or the other, your tank blows up, or your bucket bursts and your fish freeze, or you kill them with carbon dioxide. I won't get into that We'll get into that in a second. It tends to be that the people who aren't going super spendy are the ones that are going to be more ingenious about it. Like, I mean, look at the king of DIY who has like 1,000 tanks and spends thousands on his tanks. But hear me out here, because he uses different methods to make sure that his tanks, like even the filters, he'll like just make himself. You know, like you can make a filter out of a water bottle, but then if you go too far that way, you run into the people who have the bowl with the goldfish in them, and that's not what is needed to sustain life. Like you need more than that, you know? So like you have those people, and then you have the people who are like, well, you know, I need at least a 40-gallon tank for this beta, and it's like, whoa, buddy, whoa, chill out. You can definitely get caught in traps of spending way too much on fish that aren't really going to be worth that much, you know? Like you can have guppies in a super nice tank with driftwood that you bought from the store for $30 and stones that you bought for like $100 and sand that was like $30, or you can just get it used. You can just get that light off of Amazon. You can just go to the river, get your own driftwood if it's legal, boil it yourself and put it in there. So explore the different routes. There's some things that you're gonna need to go more expensive on. There's some things that you can afford to go cheaper on, and I think would look better if they were cheaper, if I can say that. And especially, you know, if you want a fish that's sought after or not sought after but gets kind of big, like for instance a common pleco. If you wanted a common pleco, don't get one from the store. get one from someone who's had it blow out their 30-gallon tank, right? So number 2, don't spend too much, don't spend too little. The third trap that I see a lot of fish keepers get stuck in, even that come to the store, is changing the water chemistry for one reason or another. When you keep fish, there's definitely a safe zone to keep them in. Like you don't want ammonia in there, you don't want nitrates, you want a little, you know, you want some nitrates, especially if you're growing plants. But when you start getting into like artificially changing the pH, into artificially changing the hardness, these things, you can get a little bit like CO2. Oh, big one. CO2. If you're now pumping CO2 into the tank, not only are you going back into spending a lot of money, possibly unnecessarily, into your tank. Like some people will just like dump all the CO2 into their tank all at once. So don't do that. But when you're changing the water chemistry of the tank, you are playing a game that not only is it unnecessary, but it could be dangerous, right? So if you're playing with CO2 and you mess up on your quantities, you could kill all your fish overnight. So you gotta be careful of that. But also if you're changing the hardness, if you're changing the pH, you don't really need to, because unless you're keeping fish that are wild caught. Now maybe if you're in the saltwater world, this is a thing. I'm not into the saltwater world myself. You know, maybe there's some specific instance where you do need to have it a very specific water chemistry. If you're keeping discus, if you're keeping fragile fish like that, if you're keeping snails and you want to have high calcium in the water. But these are all things that you shouldn't be chasing. Honestly, if you want to keep fish right, look for fish that are already going to do well in your water chemistry. Don't chase different water parameters, right? Unless, you know, chase low ammonia for sure, but don't chase water parameters just because of the fish. For instance, my favorite fish that we've talked about in the last video, I think it was, is my Farlowella Kitster. Now, Kitster is a Farlowella. He's a South American catfish, and typically in that ecosphere, in that environment, it has very low pH and very soft water. Now my water is neither of those things. It's extremely hard, it's extremely high pH, you know, like I'm rocking a 9.0 pH, 180 degrees hardness. Like it's terrible water for them. But fish adapt. A lot of fish adapt. Fish adapt mostly, I think, because they're capable of it, and because they are bred in captivity so much. They're bred in so many different environments, and they go from store to store and from country to country. So if you're chasing water parameters for your fish, just for like basic fish, don't. Stop.
Get some help.
The fourth trap that fish keepers get caught in all the time, especially at the store, I see this so much at the store, is impulse buying. Oh my gosh. Like, just because the fish looks cool doesn't mean you can keep it in your 10-gallon, bro. Like, oh my goodness. And it's always plecos, man. It's like it's always common plecos. I don't get it. I don't understand. Like, get autocinkless. Get something, get a Borneo loach. Like, get these things that will actually work. And this impulse buying stems from a lack of research. So we've all done this. You've gone to the store and you saw this awesome fish, and you've never seen that awesome fish before, which is part of why it's so awesome. And instead of doing the research, you just buy the thing and hope for the best. And that's a terrible idea, because that little kind of green and yellow fish, that could turn out to be like a bass or something like that. You have no idea. You have no idea. Even if you're at the store, like, do some research. At least figure out how big it gets, you know? Is it predatory? Is it gonna eat your other fish, you know? How big does it get? What's its diet? Like, all these things, at least get those basic points down before you buy something, because you don't want to blow up your tank. You don't want this fish to come in and eat everything. And, you know, the more research, the better. I found out that zebra danios, which work for pretty much every tank, don't work for my tank. And the reason they don't work for my tank is because I was raising my Farloella in there. You know, he was very small at that time. He didn't know what to eat. It was difficult. So you need to, so with the zebra danios, let's stay on track here. So with the zebra danios, I had to get rid of them because they have those barbells. They were able to find food because they were a lot faster, and they had the barbells, and they had good eyesight. They were able to find food a lot faster than my Farloella, which is a tongue twister there. If you say it too fast, my Farloella was starting to starve out. So I had to get rid of the zebra danio. So not only when you see these awesome fish at the store, do you need to be doing your quick research, figure out your quick points, you also need to be thinking about, how is this fish going to interact with my other fish? Is it going to eat them? Is it going to try and starve them out? Is there going to be some territoriality? Is it going to be territorial? Stop impulse buying. You're only hurting yourself. Do some research. Like, you're going to see it at the store. It's probably still going to be there when you come back tomorrow, right? Do some research, come back, get that fish. And yeah, number 4, don't impulse buy. Number 5, and ladies and gentlemen, I saved the best for last, multiple tank syndrome. This is the most expensive fish keeper trap that I have ever laid my eyes on, and I think I have I have proof right behind me with that 75-gallon tank. What multiple tank syndrome is, if you don't know, MTS, it's when you get, you know, like in so many of the scenarios we're looking at, you get a fish and it turns out it's too aggressive, or it's breeding, or blah 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 blah, or you just want a quarantine tank and then that quarantine tank's turned into a display tank. It's when you need to expand, you know, when you need a little more space, when you want more variety. Often it happens accidentally, right? You see that awesome fish and, oh wow, well, I'll keep it in the holding tank and then I'll set up a display tank for that, you know, and you just fill your entire room with tanks. And that's a major trap for fish keepers, because you end up blowing up your budget. So I guess that just wraps up the whole thing. Have a budget for fish keeping. Don't spend more than you can afford to. You're gonna make your friends mad, you're gonna make your parents mad, you're gonna make your significant other mad. Fish keeping is a door to many awesome things, to many nerdy things, but it needs to not be the thing. It needs to not be the door to being broke, you know, because it easily can be, you know. Like me talking about spending too much with the first trap of fish keeping. Don't spend too much money where you don't need to. Stop it, right? Like, if you want to keep that fish, well, like you want to keep that pleco, ooh, it's a 2-foot pleco. You could get a 75-gallon tank, or you could get a smaller pleco. You get a bristlenose pleco, you get an autocinkless, you get something similar, and you can keep that in your community tank that you already have. Or you could say, hey, I've kept these guppies for a long time in my 40-gallon. Now I want to keep African cichlids. And what you do is you put those on the market, you sell those to the store, you do something like that, and now you're keeping cichlids, right? all this, like if you guys have watched my channel, you know that I've gone through so many phases with fish. I've had cichlids, which was terrible, like African cichlids. I've had good experiences with the Bolivian rams, they're awesome. But with African cichlids, I went through that phase and I said, you know what, I'm done. Like they're too aggressive, moving on to the next thing. And I got a Farlowell Vittata. And that started that phase. And then I'm like, you know what? I want Congo tetras. Oh, Congo tetras are eating my floating plants. You know, switch them out, get Endorph neon rainbow fish. Like, you don't have to get multiple tanks to have multiple types of fish. You can phase them out. Now, if you're attached to them, consider that. But consider that in tandem with your budget. So, super important to have a budget, guys. I think that wraps up all 5 points. I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. I kind of was just making up these points on the fly, but they were pretty good, am I right? Also, I hope you guys enjoyed these eyebrows because Hope just plucked them. Oh, it was painful. Oh my gosh. Anyways, this is a random video. I hope you guys enjoyed it nonetheless. I have a ton of schoolwork to do, plus editing this video. So, you know, YouTube is pain, and I hope you guys enjoy my pain. Seems like you do. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Like it if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more like this, and better sometimes. Sometimes it does get higher quality than this. And I will see you guys next Sunday.